So as a very proud Gomeroi woman from mid-northern New South Wales, I want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the beautiful Ngunnawal people. And, you know, this land is it's so important to acknowledge the land on whose people, and the land that we're choosing to live on when we're not on our own country. So acknowledging that and acknowledging, you know, the generations of traditional people that cared for this land is very, very important. And thank you to everybody that does acknowledge. I think that's really, really important for all of us. So, thank you. So who am I? So who is Paula? So I've lived in Canberra since 2005. I'm a mother of 3 and a grandmother of 8. I'm fortunate to belong to 2 exceptional parents. My dad has since passed, but I want to acknowledge them because when I do speak and you do get to know me a bit more, I want to acknowledge that I am a product of my mother and my father because of the attributes that they created in me, I'd like to think, 50-something years ago. So it's, you know, it's held me in great stead for who I am as a person and who I am today and why I'm here today. But I'll keep reading. So my dad, my father did things always by the book, and that's where I truly understand the meaning of integrity, and I learnt that at a very young age. My dad was a fettler on the railway in a small one-horse town. It just sat over the New South Wales-Queensland border, and my mum was a stay-at-home parent. I grew up in the bush. I grew up swimming in dams with leeches, getting chased by bulls in paddocks, catching yabbies by hand, riding bareback with my friends and getting bucked off, so I was real country. I had a happy childhood, a very happy childhood. Wasn't perfect, but it was a happy one. And it was full of love and it was full of safety. And that is so important to me. My mother lovingly shared her beautiful qualities with us, her honesty and kindness, and she's a funny woman. She's a very happy, cruisy person, and that's an element that she gave to me as well. I'm pretty cruisy. My life wasn't perfect. It had its cracks every now and then, but instead of falling through those cracks, I stood confident and I stood very proud of the solid foundation my parents created and instilled in me. So I want to talk a little bit more about the work I've done particularly since I moved here to the ACT in 2005. So I'm a person who does everything with passion. It's important to me to bring that with me in everything that I do. My first job when I moved to the ACT was with Doris, a Women and Children's Refuge. And I spent quite a few years working in that refuge, supporting women and with children who were leaving family and domestic violence. And the majority of those women were migrant women. There were women that didn't even speak English. That they were women that you had to have skills on interpreter services, utilising them. You know, you had women and children that sat in a particular space where their visa, no one was responsible for them. So there was no income. But that refuge that I worked at provided support, financial support, provided all of the supports that, if you can imagine living in another country, you don't speak that language. You're escaping family and domestic violence. Where do you go? How do you get there? How do you know there is a service there? And these are the things that I'm really passionate about. Is family and domestic violence? Is sexual assault? These are the areas that I've immersed myself in since I've moved to the ACT. And again, every bit of work that I've done is always connected to community. And I don't just mean the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander community, but the ACT community, the diversity of that community. It doesn't matter what colour you are. You know, that violence affects everyone. But it does affect people very differently when you come from a minority group. So we have to understand those differences that cater for those people that need it the most. So very, very quickly, I've worked in youth refuges. I've worked at Canberra Rape Crisis Centre. I've worked on the crisis line. I've worked in government in child protection. I loved all of this work that I do, and I want to continue to go out there and advocate for survivors of these forms of abuse. We've got to call it for what it is. We cannot sugarcoat this in our community of the ACT. You know, we have to be comfortable with saying exactly what this form of violence does, what it is, and do something about it. Because I care about the people affected by family, domestic violence, sexual assault, and I know our community does. So we need to come together to make sure that we look after our community here in the ACT. And I bring experience and passion into this position. Very quickly, you know, I'm also a member of the elected body. I bring the experience of working with local government through our elected body, and that is advocating with the different directorates on a lot of issues. So I'm very familiar with what I need to do if I'm elected into this position, but those are my passions, and those are the things that I want to work on to make sure that our community is a safer community, and that we all know where the help is and what those agencies are that can help us if any one of us is affected by any of these forms of abuse. Thank you.